Okay, so in the previous lecture, we are discussing about the routing in Web API, how to set up routes, attribute-based routing or convention-based routing in our Web API project. And then you can, using attribute-based routing, you can override the existing routes that you set up using the convention-based routing. In addition to that, we have also seen how to write down the get methods, how to invoke them from the client, or using the tools like developer tools or Postman tools, you can invoke them. We'll also discuss now today the other methods for performing the CRUD operations on the data. So we are manipulating the products data. So we have get method so far. Now we'll introduce few more methods for adding the product to the list, and then we'll discuss about the different return types of this action method. Okay, so let me share my slide. Okay, so this is the code that we have seen so far. We are having three get methods. One will one will return entire product list. Second will return the product if I know the ID, and I'm using the ID as the index to the our static array. Okay, static product list. And third one is, if I know the name of the product, I can get the product. Okay, so get product if we know the name of the product. Okay, fine. So just for testing purpose, I have just done some hard coded thing. Okay, you can see that it is hard coded, but later on you can replace this stub code with the actual implementation where it will be applicable for entire product list. And further, you can extend it for storing the product list into the database instead of the static list. Okay. And here you will see that what could be the return type for this. The return type is IEnumerable product. For this, it is the product object itself. Here also product object itself. But other than that, you can also have the return type void or HTTP response message or iHTTP action results. So these are the few return type of the action method available in the Web API. Okay, so this is available in our Web API controller class. And further, we have one more method called get product with ID and name. If I know the ID and name, then I should get the product details for that product, where ID and name must match with the ID and name of the product. So again, this is the hard-coded version of this particular implementation of this method. Now we are just testing it that if I give this particular URL, then it should return me the entire product list. So basically the three products I'm getting as an output. So this is the full response. But if I want to retrieve the product with the given ID, so I can pass the ID as the query string parameter, and I should get the product details of that particular product only having ID 1. Okay, with product ID 1. So that way you can test your API. If the ID is 3, you can get the product with the ID 3 and name and price. Okay, name and price. Now, if I give the product ID 5, it should result into the error, because if you look at the code, it is in the index is out of range. Okay, here error handling code is not written. So if the it is goes beyond the index or range of the indices, then it should throw an exception. That exception message or error message will be created, and that entire error message comes to the client. Okay, and we know that the error is index was out of range. Okay, and stack trace is also written. Now we want to test the action method, wherein we can search the product by its name. So again, we can use the query string parameter. I pass the value of name equal to monitor, and I am getting the product with whose wherein the name of the product is monitor, and the other details ID and price. If I search by the product name to be the keyboard, I should get the product with the name keyboard, ID and its price. If I want to search the product, if I know the name and ID and name both, again we can pass it as the query string parameter, and we get the product details. But what if the ID and name doesn't match? Okay, here ID and name doesn't match. Okay, product with ID 2 is keyboard, not the mouse. Then it should create a dummy product, and it should return the product with ID 0, name the error message, product doesn't exist, and the price is 0 again. So here we are basically testing our API for all the possible cases, even the exception cases. And now if I give the correct IDA and name, then it should give me the correct product details. Now we are trying to add few more methods to our controller class. Now I want to add the new product to my product list. So here add product will add a product for which ID is known. Okay, ID is given rather. Now here you will see that the product, this action method name doesn't start with post. So in that case, we can annotate that method with the attribute HTTP post. So there are attributes like HTTP get, HTTP post, HTTP put, HTTP delete, HTTP patch. So you can decorate the action method if the method name doesn't begin with the HTTP verb. Okay, so that's why we'll see that I have annotated the action method with the this HTTP post attribute, because all these three methods are post request. So here I want to add a new product for which I am providing the ID. Okay, I'm providing the ID. So create a new product object, set its ID, name is not assigned, price is 0, and it is added to the product list. Okay, it is added to the product list. If I know the full details, okay, add product with the all the details like ID, name, and price. Then again, you create a new product, new empty product, assign the ID, name, and price, and finally add that product to our product list. Okay. So now there are two ways to add the product. I know the individual values like ID, name, and price, so individual properties. But if I have the product object ready, then I can use this method, wherein I have the product object ready. So I will simply pass the reference to the product object. But now the code is slightly changed, because now we have to check for the nullable value of the this parameter. Okay, if this product doesn't point to a valid product object, then we are not going to assign the ID, name, and price. Otherwise, it will result into the exception at runtime. Now we'll see the return type is void, because after adding the record to the product list, we are not expecting in return anything in return. So in all these three product, return type is void. Now, how do we pass this data actually? So suppose I want to pass ID. How do I pass this ID to my API? Can anyone give answer? Suppose I want to issue the post request and I want to create a new product. I want to pass the ID. How should I pass the ID? Where do we pass this ID? Okay, in the URL. Okay, the URL we have to pass the ID. As part of the URL, we have to pass the ID. Okay. Now, if I want to pass this ID name and price, where should I pass this ID name and price? Correct. In the URL, you have to pass this as the query string parameter. So what should we do? We should write something like this: ID equal to 1. Okay. Name equal to name. Because query string parameter should be separated by ampersand character. And what if I want to pass this product object? What if I want to pass this product object? How should I pass this product object? Correct. Request body. Okay, so that should be passed inside the HTTP request body. Okay, not as the query string parameter. Okay. So once you know this, the rest of the process is very simple. Either you can use browser developer tools, or you can use the Postman tool or Fiddler tool or any other tool of your choice or browser extension you can use to test your REST API. So if this is the URL, okay, if this is the URL, then we are getting the entire product list. And if you go to the browser developer tools, you can click on the network tab. There you will get the response. The status code is 200 and the method was get, and you are getting the product list. If you double click on this, you are redirected to the details, like you have the parameter, response message, okay, the and other values you can have for other statistics would be available under timing, cookies. So you can click on this button, edit and response. So this is the Firefox browser developer tool currently I'm using, and you can click on edit and respond, and then here you can generate a new request. So as the HTTP verb, you can write down post. This is my URL. So I want to create a new record. Basically, I want to create a new product record with the ID equal to 1. Okay, so ID is passed as the query string parameter, and currently request body is empty. Okay, request body is empty because the ID that I'm passing as part of the URL, and we are getting that output is 204 no content. The reason is, what is the return value of our this? The reason is here it is void. So basically, this action method will match. Out of these three methods, this action method will match because it has one of the argument ID, and I am passing that ID as the query string parameter. And if you remember that if you are passing the primitive values, okay, if you are passing the primitive values, that should come from the URL. And if you are passing the value from the, if you are passing the complex type, then it should come from the request body. Okay. So This you remember, this is the default assumption of the web API project. So this framework will expecting the primitive type from the URL and the complex type from the request body. So here we'll see that ID matches and this action method will be executed and it will add a product, dummy product with the ID, with the given ID and name not assigned and price to be 0. So what is the output we are expecting? That if once again we retrieve all the product here, we should get the 3 product as well as one more product with ID 1, name not assigned and value is 0. So here error checking is not done. For example, 2 products cannot have the same ID, so that kind of error checking is not done. So this is just we are testing it that whether our product, our post request works or not. And we have variation of multiple, and I want to show you that multiple post request might be there. Okay, so depending upon your requirement, that I want to add a product, if I know the ID, if I want to add the product, if I know the full details, and what if I want to pass only the attributes of the product, or if I what if I have the product object ready, then how should I do that? So this example will make it clear all kind of these cases. So this is working. The first method is working. Now second case is I know the product details. So I know the ID, name and price. So you can see over here that I'm passing the ID, name and price as part of the query string parameter. And whatever you type in, that will be displayed over here. Okay. Whatever you type in, that will be displayed over here. Request body is still empty because now these are the data. Okay. Data you can pass as the query string parameter or as part of the request body or both, right? You can pass inside both. And remember, this query string parameter must match with the parameter of the action method. So in my action method, the parameter names are ID, name and price. Once again, let us go back to this. Let me clear this out. Here, for this action method, the parameters are ID, name and price. So it should match with the same ID, name and price in our URL. So you can see that here URL, ID, name and price matches. Finally, sorry. So as the response we are getting 204 no content because the return type is void. If the operation is successful, always you should get this thing. But we'll see that we can change this also. We can change this also. Status code can be changed depending upon the whether the operation was successful or not. So now we are once again checking. We are retrieving the entire product list. And you can see that the new product is added with the ID 1, name, speaker, and price is 900. So see that this product is now added in our product list. Okay. So one more product is added in our product list. This is the product list. And now I want to test the third action method where I know the product object. So right now we do not have the client ready. So we'll create the product object ourselves. And again, there is no client. So directly we will send the product object into the JSON format. If you have client, what we require, we need to do the serialization. We need to convert it into the JSON or XML type, and then we need to send the data. So here, this web API framework by default supports both the JSON type and XML type. So we can simply specify what is my content type. So I want to send the product details. So I'm specifying via this header value, key value pair, content type to be application/JSON. So we have to modify this. Okay, we have to add this. if it is not there, if it is not present, we have to add this content type to be the application slash JSON. And now I want to pass the product object in the JSON format. So product ID, name, and price. So now you see that these are the property name of our product model class. These are the property name of our product model class, product ID, name, and price. So these are the respective value. And now if you look at, once again we search, we retrieve the entire product list, new product is added. That means now out of this multiple method, the third method is being executed. So now, sorry, I think I've gone past this code. Yeah, this is being executed because now the product object must be passed inside the request body, and we are getting it. And if you look at the product model, it has three properties: product ID, name, and price. Okay, so these are the three properties of the product model class, right? So